just as soon as I get rid of those pesky, beloved family members. I couldn't help thinking that this birthday was getting better and better. Now I had 2 big surprises coming up. Make that 3. The phone rang in the hall. It was our home line, not my cell, which everyone knew to use for work. I also had a pager up on the dresser where I could hear it, so it seemed safe to go ahead and answer. I even thought it might be some friendly soul calling to wish me a happy birthday, or at the very worst, someone trying to sell me a satellite dish. Will I ever learn? Probably not in this lifetime. Chapter 2. Alex, it's Davies. I'm sorry to bother you at home. Ramon Davies was superintendent of detectives with Metro, and also my boss, and he was on the line. It's my birthday. Who died? I asked. I was ticked off, mostly at myself for answering the phone in the first place. Caroline Cross, he said, and my heart nearly stopped. At that very moment, the kitchen door swung open and the family came out singing. Nana had an elaborate pink and red birthday cake on a tray, with an American Airlines travel folio clipped on top. They started to sing happy birthday until Bree held up a hand to quiet them. My posture and my face must have said something. They all stopped right where they were. The joyful singing ended almost mid-note. My family remembered whose birthday this was, Detective Alex Cross's. Caroline was my niece, my brother's only daughter. I hadn't seen her in 20 years, not since just after Blake died. That would have made her 24 now, at the time of her death. The floor under my feet felt like it was gone. Part of me wanted to call Davies a liar. The other part, the cop, spoke up. Where is she now? I just got off the phone with Virginia State Police. The remains are at the ME's office in Richmond. I'm sorry, Alex. I hate to be the one to tell you this. Remains, I muttered. It was such a cold word, but I appreciated Davies not overhandling me. I walked out of the room, sorry I'd said even that much in front of my family. Are we talking homicide here? I assume that we are. I'm afraid so. What happened? My heart was thudding dangerously. I almost didn't want to know. I don't have a lot of details, he told me, in a way that instantly gave me a hint. He was holding something back. Ramon, what's going on here? Tell me. What do you know about Caroline? Just take one thing at a time, Alex. If you leave now, you can probably be there in about 2 hours. I'll ask for one of the responding officers to meet you. I'm on my way. And Alex, I'd almost hung up the phone, my mind in splinters. What is it? I don't think you should go alone. Chapter 3. Running hard and using my siren most of the way, it took less than an hour and a half to get down to Richmond. The Department of Forensic Science was housed in a new building on Marshall Street. Davies had arranged for Detective Corin Fellows from the State Police CI Bureau to meet us there, Bree and me. The car's been towed to our lot up at Division Headquarters on Route 1, Fellows told us. Otherwise, everything's here. The remains are downstairs in the morgue. All the obvious evidentiary materials in the lab on this level. There was that terrible word again. Remains. What did you bag? Bree asked him. Troopers found some women's clothing and a small black purse wrapped in a mover's blanket in the trunk. Here, I pulled this to show you. He handed me a Rhode Island driver's license in a plastic sleeve. The only thing I recognized at first was Caroline's name. The girl in the photo looked quite beautiful to me, like a dancer, with her hair pulled back from her face and a high forehead. And the big eyes. I remember those too. Eyes as big as the sky. That's what my older brother Blake had always said. I could see him now rocking her on the old porch glider on 5th Street and laughing every time she blinked up at him. He was in love with that baby girl. We all were. Sweet Caroline. Now both of them were gone. My brother to drugs, and Caroline, what had happened to her? I handed the driver's license back to Detective Fellows and asked him to point us toward the investigating ME's office. If I was going to get through this at all, I had to keep moving. The medical examiner, Dr. Amy Carbondale, met us downstairs. When we shook hands, hers was still a little cool from the latex gloves she'd been wearing. She seemed awfully young for this kind of work, maybe early 30s, and a little unsure of what to do with me, what to say. Dr. Cross, I've followed your work. I'm very, very sorry for your loss, she said in a near whisper that carried sympathy and respect. If you could just give me the facts of the case, I'd appreciate it, I told her. She adjusted her glasses, silver wire rims working up to it. Based on the samples I took, there was apparently a 96% morselization of the body. A few digits did survive, and we were able to get a print match to the name on the license that was found. Excuse me? Morselization? I'd never heard the word before in my life. To her credit, Dr. Carbondale looked me right in the eye. There's every reason to believe a grinder of some sort was used. Likely a wood chipper. Her words took my breath away. I felt them in my chest. A wood chipper? Then I was thinking, why keep her clothes and driver's license? As proof of Caroline's identity? A souvenir for the killer? Dr. Carbondale was still talking. I'll do a full tox screen, run a DNA profile, and of course we'll sieve for bullet fragments or other metals. But actual cause of death is going to be hard to prove here, if not impossible. Where is she? I asked, just trying to focus. Where were Caroline's remains? Dr. Cross, are you sure right now is the time? He's sure, Bree said. She knew what I needed, and she gestured toward the lab. Let's get on with it. Please, doctor. We're all professionals here. We followed Dr. Carbondale through 2 sets of swinging doors into an examination room that resembled a bunker. It had a gray concrete floor and a high tiled ceiling, mounted with cameras and umbrella lights. There were the usual sinks and stainless steel everywhere, and a single white body bag on one of the narrow silver tables. Right away, I could see something was very strange. Wrong. Both. The body bag bulged in the middle and lay flat against the table at the ends. I was dreading this in a way I couldn't have imagined beforehand. The remains. Dr. Carbondale stood across from us and pulled back the zipper. The heat sealing is ours, she said. I closed it back up after my initial exam earlier. Inside the body bag there was a second bag. This one looked like some kind of industrial plastic. It was a frosted white translucent material, just clear enough to show the color of meat and blood and bone inside. I felt like my mind shut down for a few seconds, which was as long as I could deny what I was seeing. It was a dead person in that bag, but not a body. Caroline, but not Caroline. Chapter 4. The drive back to Washington was like a bad dream that might never end. When Bree and I finally got home, the house was starkly quiet and still. I thought about waking Nana, but the fact that she didn't get up on her own told me she was out cold and needed the rest. All of this bad news could wait until later in the morning. My birthday cake sat untouched in the refrigerator, and someone had left the American Airlines folio on the counter. I glanced at it long enough to see 2 tickets for St. John, an island in the Caribbean I'd always wanted to visit. It didn't matter. All of that was on hold now. Everything was. I felt as though I was moving in slow motion. Certain details had an eerie clarity. You have got to go to bed. Bree took me by the hand and led me out of the kitchen. If for no other reason than so you can think clearly about this tomorrow. You mean today, I said. I mean tomorrow, after you rest. I noticed she hadn't said sleep. We dragged ourselves upstairs, took off our clothes, and fell into bed. Bree held my hand and wouldn't let go. An hour or so later, I was still staring at the ceiling, hung up on the question that had been dogging me ever since we left Richmond. Why? Why had this happened? Why to Caroline? Why a goddamn wood chipper? Why remains instead of a body? As a detective, I should have been thinking about the physical evidence and where it could lead me, but I didn't exactly feel like a detective, lying there in the dark. I felt like an uncle and a brother. In a way, we'd lost Caroline once before. After Blake died, her mother didn't want anything more to do with the family. She'd moved away without so much as a parting word. Phone numbers were changed, birthday presents were returned. At the time, it seemed like the saddest possible thing. But since then, I'd learned over and over what a staggering capacity the world has for misery and self-inflicted wounds. Somewhere around 4:30, I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and sat up. My heart and mind were not to be eased. Bree's voice stopped me. "Where are you going? It's still night." "I don't know, Bree," I said. "Maybe the office. Try and get something done. You should go back to sleep." "I haven't been asleep." She sat up behind me and put her arms around my shoulders. "You're not alone on this. Whatever's happening to you is happening to me." I let my head hang and just listened to her soothing voice. She was right. We were in this together. It had been like that ever since we'd met, and that was a good thing. "I'm going to do anything it takes for you and for this whole family to get through this," she said. "And tomorrow, you and I are going to go out there, and we're going to start to find out who did this terrible thing. You hear me?" For the first time since Davy's phone call, I felt a warm spot in my chest. Nothing like happiness or even relief, but gratitude anyway. Something to be glad for. I'd lived most of my life without Bree, and now I couldn't imagine how. "How did I find you?" I asked her. "How did I get so lucky?" "It's not luck." She held on to me even tighter. "It's love, Alex." Chapter 5.
It seemed both appropriate and ironic to Gabriel Reese that this odd, almost unprecedented middle-of-the-night meeting take place in a building originally built for the State, Navy, and War Departments. Reese lived by a deep sense of the historic in everything he did. Washington, you could say, was in his blood, in his family's blood, for 3 generations. The vice president himself had called Reese, sounding more than a little tense, and Walter Tillman had run 2 Fortune 100 companies, so he knew a thing or two about pressure. He hadn't given details, just told Reese to be at Eisenhower Executive Office Building now. Technically, this was the VP's ceremonial office, the same one where VPs from Johnson through Cheney had welcomed leaders from every quadrant of the globe. More apt and to the point, it was away from the West Wing and whatever eyes and ears this secret meeting was clearly designed to avoid. The doors to the inner office were closed when Reese got there. Dan Cormorant, head of the White House's Secret Service detail, was stationed outside with 2 other agents farther down the hall in either direction. Reese let himself in. Cormorant followed and closed the heavy wood doors behind them. "Sir?" said Reese. Vice President Tillman stood with his back to them at the far end of the room. The row of windows reflected the glow of half-lit globes on an elaborate gasolier overhead, a reproduction. Several glass-encased ship models gave a more specific reference to the building's history. This office had been General Pershing's during World War II. Tillman turned and spoke. "We've got a situation, Gabe. Come and sit down. This is not good. Hard to imagine how it could be much worse."
Chapter 6.
Agent Cormorant walked forward and took a standing position next to the vice president. It was an odd move, and Reese's gut tightened another notch. He was chief of staff. There was very little that the Secret Service should know about ahead of him, but they clearly did in this case. What in the name of God had happened?